and we don't want insulin to be predominating, because if we have insulin predominating, then we're going to end up gaining more weight regardless of what we do. It really doesn't matter what we do. How exactly do you lose weight? And more specifically, let's target the belly fat. So how do you lose that visceral fat anyways? What exactly is the best way to do this? Now, the way to do this is we have to understand what exactly causes the fat cell to be burned in the first place. And this is going to be the answer to our question. Now, we already know that hormone-sensitive lipase in particular is absolutely amazing at burning belly fat. So how do we get hormone-sensitive lipase active? Now, we know already that glycolysis in particular actually inhibits this process, more specifically when insulin is elevated. And we know that when glucagon is elevated instead of insulin being elevated, that glucagon will allow for this hormone-sensitive lipase to be made. Now, this is another way of saying that in order for us to elevate the glucagon state, we need to either do two things. We either need to, one, be in a fasted state, or two, we need to eat certain foods which do stimulate this state. And there are certain foods, oddly enough. Now, assuming that you probably don't want to just be in a fasted state the entire time and constantly fast, that is an option. But the other option is probably much easier and mentally just easier. It's the one I do as well. Oddly enough, this way also is exactly what our ancestors did actually. Yes, and by our ancestors, I mean Middle Pleistocene Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens themselves, or at least early Homo sapiens in particular. Okay, so we know that we have to stimulate glucagon. So how exactly do we stimulate this glucagon? Well, this is where we come to fat. Now, we already know that fat in particular does stimulate glucagon, and we know that specifically carbohydrate actually stimulates insulin, and we don't want insulin to be predominating, because if we have insulin predominating, then we're going to end up gaining more weight regardless of what we do. It really doesn't matter what we do. Luckily enough, there actually is a food that does exactly this, the one that doesn't stimulate insulin and the one that actually stimulates glucagon, and that is meat. Yes, meat does this very, very well. This is because meat in particular has protein as well as fat, and it is very, very minimal in carbohydrates, and basically the carbohydrates are negligible in meat. Now, this is what allows it to burn fat so much, because we are stimulating glucagon by eating that fat, and not only that, protein on top of that acts as a catalyst. So all it does is it stimulates the glucagon even more. And if we were to do the opposite and we were to eat carbohydrates of any sort, maybe a Twinkie or even just fruit or a vegetable, then we are stimulating insulin. And in the process of stimulating insulin, we are stimulating weight gain for our body. And this is not what we want to do if we want to burn weight and burn off that fat. Now, this means that if you're eating meat and eating only meat, you will 100% lose that weight. And we even have a study to show this. This is the Harvard study of 2020, which shows that people going on the carnivore diet, they had miraculous effects. And if you're really interested in more details in that, then I recommend you check out my video on that I've made, because I explain that in particular, and it's truly shocking. However, if we do have meat and we try to add a little bit of carbohydrate, it actually does significantly hinder the result. And the more carbohydrate we add, the more that it hinders the results. And this is because insulin will end up going up. And when the body has a choice between higher levels of insulin or glucagon, well, sadly, insulin does predominate in this case, and it will cause a massive amount of weight to be stored, because the body's insulin to glucagon ratio will be significantly favored for insulin, and this is not what we want to do. So in order to stimulate that fat burning, we basically need to be eating meat, and pretty much only meat. Now, oddly enough, there are many people who do this, including me. Now, just as my personal example, I used to be about 175, and I used to be definitely weighing a little bit towards the heavier side. And I went from 175 to about 159. And that was quite a big deal, because I wasn't expecting to lose that much weight specifically in a week. And that kind of shocked me. It made me look at this and go, wow, turns out I can really just shred weight off as long as I am eating meat and eating only meat. Now, when it comes to meat, it doesn't really matter too much what in particular particular you choose, but some of the better options or the best possible options would be things like ruminant meat. So that means meat from lamb or even beef in particular, and that's because the specifically deuterium and as well as the polyunsaturated fat content is much lower. And bacon is perfectly fine though too. It's not necessarily the same level of ruminant, but I like the taste of it, so occasionally even I will have bacon. Salmon is fine. Basically, if it's a animal food, then it is perfectly fine for carnivore. Now, if you do add dairy, cheese, or any of these dairy sort of products, milk, doesn't really matter what it is, those do have a bit of glucose in them. And remember, the more of it that you add, the more that it is going to hinder your results. So if you want to really maximize the results and see how amazing this is, like what I did, then you just go full meat and you see the effects, and it'll show probably within a week or 2 weeks. It's pretty amazing. Now, not only does this actually lose weight for you, it does a whole lot of other things. It can do things like basically get rid of your chronic fatigue. It can improve your IBS, which is in my case. I mean, the list is endless. It can improve your acne. I don't care what it is. If it's a physical or a mental problem for that matter, there's a pretty good chance this is either going to cure it 100% or significantly alleviate the symptoms around 90%. It is really, really amazing. Now, if you're interested in the details behind why all of this works and how this works in the first place, then I recommend you check out my Science Behind Carnivore playlist, where I explain the science behind how all of this works in a whole lot more detail. And when I say a whole lot more detail, I mean a ton of detail. We go into biochemistry and we explain what exactly is the most optimal thing, and you get to see it from a biochemistry perspective. So yeah, without further ado, thanks for watching. If you're interested in supporting the channel, then please like, comment, and subscribe, because it really does go a long way. And if you really want to help me in particular grow this channel, then please click the join button down below, because it can really, really help grow this channel. Now, without further ado, I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Pew.